Oh, hello, you wrong'un. This video, I hope, is going to give you more information. It's going to give you more understanding, and it's going to lift the veil just a little further so you can get to see the people and moving parts involved in the Huw Edwards scandal and crisis. So we'll start at the very top. We'll start with God, because God in the BBC is Tim Davie. He's the Director General. Now, Tim Davie, you've probably heard the name or seen the name. You'll have seen it written down in the newspapers all over the last 10 days. And you've possibly seen him interviewed on Radio 4 on BBC TV. Who is Tim Davie? Well, before he joined the BBC, his background was in marketing. And then in 2005, Tim Davie joined the BBC as the Director of Marketing, Communications and Audiences. So this is exactly the right guy to have at the helm in this particular crisis, because he understands the marketing element. He understands communications in a modern day news environment and audiences. That's me and you. So he gets all of this. So that's Tim Davie, God in the BBC. He's where the buck stops. If anything goes wrong, he's to answer for it. Now, he's quoted in the Sunday Times as saying that he has concerns over how the BBC staff are covering the Huw Edwards scandal and crisis. Scandal and crisis are applicable, I feel, but they're my words, not his. And he plans to talk to the BBC News department about this. So let me just get this right. A marketing guy is going to speak to journalists about journalism. Or is it the marketing guy going to talk to the journalists about communications and what is the narrative and what is the message that the BBC is trying to give to you and me and other news media? Friends have said that he would rather it wasn't dealt with like this. Like what? Journalists reporting on facts? Maybe. Maybe not, but Tim Davie is where the buck stops within the BBC. Now, we have to reflect on the last 10 days or so. It's been a whirlwind. Huw Edwards has been admitted to hospital. At least that's what we're being told. And I've told you many times, I'm a cynical old tart. Unless I see it with these, I don't believe it. Even when it's in there. Sometimes I don't believe it. So I don't know where Huw Edwards is. Because it's the news media that's proven to be liars that's telling us where he is. The BBC, well, they've let everyone down, to be fair. In my view, one phone call and one email. Do you think that is sufficient? The parents, the mum and the stepdad, went to the police first in April. No, Joy, it's not illegal. Then went to the BBC. All they wanted was this whole money line to stop. This money that was being used for, well, recreationally. They wanted it stopped. The flow of money to their child, they wanted it stopped. They haven't accepted money as far as I'm aware at this point, but they wanted it to stop. So they went to the BBC in May, 18th and 19th. The stepdad walks into a BBC building and wants them to get it to stop. The face of BBC News is supplying up to 35 grand to their child. For what? Well, we're being told one thing, but 35 Gs. That is a lot. Now, I'll give you what I believe this is. This, the whole situation, if you step back from it, this is a fight for the soul of the BBC. It's been a long time coming. Well, 7 years, to be fair. Because we've had similar dark nights of the soul when Stuart Hall was found out and Jimmy Savile, sadly, after death, was found out by the Dame Janet Smith review report. Now, that particular inquiry went on for 4 years. They looked into Hall and Savile, and they found that Hall had up to 20 victims. And the sexual assaults and rapes they happened on BBC property. I mean, I really don't know. Look, I'm a guy that talks for a living, but sometimes I'm lost for words. I've been reading Dame Janet Smith's 700-page report today, and I can tell you, I haven't read it all, but what I have read, I had to go and shower afterwards. I felt that grubby. Savile, 72 victims of sexual assault. 8 rapes, one as young as 8, according to Dame Janet Smith's report. And that report is freely online. If you want to go and read it, you will find that what I am telling you is factual and from Dame Janet's report. So that was published in February 2016. It was going to be published in 2015, but the Met Police said there was still some ongoing inquiry, so they wanted Dame Janet Smith to delay the publishing until 2016, which is what she did. Now, I've said that I believe this is a fight for the soul of the BBC. But there is Katie Razzle, one of the BBC's own, saying that Huw Edwards embodies the values of the BBC. Now, I'm trying to reconcile myself with that Huw Edwards embodies the values of the BBC. So the values of the BBC is this: you go around doing whatever you want to do with impunity behind your wife's back. Go and dance with your peccadillos, do whatever you want, so long as you don't get caught. The values of the BBC? Really? Is that the values of the BBC? Playtime? Behind your wife's back? Because although people are trying to divert you from a particular narrative, which is the boy didn't do good behind his wife's back, and it's his wife that some people will view as saving Huw Edwards, surely it's not illegal what he did. We've been told that by the police. But this is not about legality. This whole story is not about legality. It's about the lies, the subterfuge, and everything going on in the background. And 35 G's, and the wife didn't know about him spending that. Well, you know, he has his own money, but 35 G's, and the missus didn't know. Can you imagine if you wasted 35 G's in the bookies, or Frank Boff, Colombian marching powder and dancing girls? Because that virtually killed Frank Boff's career. So I want to take a moment to have a look at how they're diverting your attention from here. And they're sending you over there. Because they don't want you to look here. They don't. Not one news media outlet has referred to the Savile inquiry, the Stuart Hall inquiry, and Dame Janet Smith's output in 2016. Not one news outlet. Not one. Not even the BBC. And the reason I say that is because Dame Janet made recommendations in her 700-page report. And it appears that the BBC haven't paid the blindest bit of notice to this report or the recommendations, because we find ourselves here once again in grubby, turgid territory. So let's have a look. Some people are cynical and saying the mental health card has been played. That was to get Huw Edwards out of the limelight. PDQ. That could be a valid point. Have you noticed the mainstream media's narrative that there's something called the Karpman drama triangle? And what that is, it's three-pronged, it's a triangle, and at the top you have the victim, and then you have the perpetrator, and then you have the rescuer. So in this particular drama triangle, they're trying to portray Huw Edwards and the BBC as the victim. I mean, how did we end up there with Edwards and or the BBC as the victim? And the perpetrators appear to be, well, they're pointing the finger at Murdoch. They're pointing the finger at Murdoch's media empire. They're pointing the finger at the parents, because youth number one said it was rubbish, the story. And the parents have given a couple of interviews to the Murdoch empire. I'm told it's being aired on Talk TV. They're going to sit with their back to the camera and they're going to mask their voice so you can't identify them at all. That's the Karpman all one word, Karpman, the Cartman drama triangle. The victim, the perpetrator, and the rescuer. So, if they're the victim, who's the perpetrator? Murdoch. Now, I'm not suggesting that is true, but that's the narrative that's been promulgated in the press. And who's the rescuer? Huw Edwards' wife. So, if that's the first time you've heard of it, it's a very well-known thing in transactional analysis. The Cartman triangle. Victim, and the victim technically could be the parents. The mum and stepdad. Not Edwards and the BBC, but it's very clever in the manipulation. So now we're getting to sort of 10 days after it all blew up. Everybody was guessing, and then Huw Edwards was named, and it was all over the Sun. The Sun said they're not going to do any more publishing. They're not. So the story, seemingly, is dying. And then, look who pops up. Andy Coulson. Andy Coulson, ex-News of the World editor. Ex-jail inmate. Oh, he's got some background, but Andy Coulson is his PR company look after high worth individuals and crisis manage whatever's going on for those high worth individuals. So Andy Coulson, the minute he appears, Huw Edwards has played the mental health card and disappeared. Story stopped. In its tracks, stopped. Because everybody, the public, you and I, are trying to do the right thing. We've done this since March 2020. We want to do the right thing. We believe in goodness. We believe in justice. And we believe, more importantly, in decency. So where's the integrity in all of this? Where is the decency in all this? And where is our hope for a brighter day tomorrow? Where? Because what's the old saying? It's better to travel in hope than arrive disappointed. We've had no denials, none, zero, zip, nix, nada from Huw Edwards. Not a single solitary denial from Huw Edwards. Not even the youth. The first youth said, nah, it's rubbish. But didn't deny that he had accepted money and didn't deny that he knew Huw Edwards. 4 people involved in this by the time the story was stopped, and nobody denied anything. So it's all true. Handing over the money, the 35 grand, it's all true. No denials. It must be true. Because that's the first thing that would happen. They would deny. And if you look at the high and mighty, the powerful, they always have deniability. Always. And they won't allow anything to touch them if there isn't deniability. So why is Huw Edwards and the BBC being portrayed as a victim? Because the only other people that can be portrayed as victims in this whole story are the parents. The parents who wanted it to stop. The parents who wanted it to go away. And the parents who went to the police first, not the Sun. Now, remember what you're reading in the mainstream media. They're saying, oh, they went to the Sun. Why didn't they go to the police? Because they did. They went to the police and the police said, no, it's not illegal. Philip Schofield, unwise, not illegal. So not only are we finding ourselves in similar territory to Savile and Hall and Rolf Harris and Philip Schofield, but all of a sudden, the BBC and Huw Edwards are the victims in all this. Who's paying the lawyers? Who's got lawyers and who's paying for them? Just a question that kind of trips off the tongue. It's a legitimate journalistic question, if we're talking about BBC journalists. And is young Huw being paid while he's being treated in hospital? Don't forget that drama triangle. It comes in very handy, very, very handy. And I've used it many times, many times. So have you noticed how the news outlets are now saying, Huw Edwards, it's a personal tragedy. They're his actions. He's responsible for them. Not anybody else. No one. Not the missus. Not his kids. Not the BBC. Him. Huw Edwards. responsible for his actions. And ultimately, that could be his downfall. We don't know how this is going to play out. We don't know what ace cards they've got up their sleeve. But they are now trying to manipulate the mainstream narrative. Could be viewed as a Mexican standoff. Murdoch Empire, BBC Empire. BBC is the voice of the government. So, given all that, I'm going to make a video about Dame Janet Smith's review report because it is just horrific, breathtaking, and saddening reading. It's horrific. They tell you where the victims became victims. It details literally everything in 700 pages about all the managers in the BBC who might have known but didn't know, those who refused to give interviews because they were, I'm ill. Didn't want to do a face-to-face interview, even at home. No, I was ill. It is just horrific reading. And I would suggest anybody who has any interest in the Huw Edwards scandal, read it. Because some of the stuff at the end is just heartbreaking. Savile raped an 8-year-old. And the BBC didn't take on board Dame Janet Smith's recommendations. And if they did, let's have an output, BBC, and tell us, what did you do after the Dame Janet Smith review report recommendations were given to you? I'll find the... within the next video, I'm going to give you the statement that the BBC issued after that was released. But I have an answer. I have an answer to all of this. And it's not the machinations and the subterfuge and how they're going to manage the narrative and what they're going to do and how they're going to do it and where they're going to do it. It's really simple. This is 2023. Society has changed beyond all recognition. They did say a couple of years ago, it's the new normal. This is 2023. So BBC, if you're listening, this is what you need to do. This is not Dame Janet Smith's recommendations. This is Adrian Allen's, because it's really simple. From the people that I've spoken to, from the polls that I've held on this channel, and remember, the poll that we had over the last few days, do you want Huw Edwards back on telly? No. No. And if you don't understand what I'm saying, no. 53% of 1,400 respondents said no. And 20-odd% said defund the BBC. Do you know how many people said yes? 10%. That's 90% of 1,400 respondents didn't agree with what the Daily Mirror was on, they put on their front page. So the answer to all of this, decency, truth, integrity. That's what we expect from our nation's broadcaster, our public service broadcaster. But here's the answer and a route map for the BBC to achieve that. And it's really simple. All BBC employees and freelancers, that's the talent and the staff within the BBC, it's 20-odd thousand of them, they should sign with immediate effect a morality clause within their contracts. The reason for their employment needs to have a morality clause inserted. And what happens if they break that? So something breaks on Twitter or social media, or there's an investigation by Newsnight into somebody's activities, and they find that that person with 3 victims has been inappropriate. It's a morality clause. It's not a legality clause. It's a morality clause. And the morality clause will say, you have breached this morality clause, you're sacked. No appeal. Off you go. Because then that would just close down all of the wrong uns. I mean, all of the wrong uns in the BBC. They might lose 10,000 staff, but at least they're adhering to a morality clause. And the morality clause covers morals, not legals. Now, I'm sure they already have a contract for legality. So if you do anything illegal, off you go. Get that morality clause into every single contract that the BBC has and issues. And that way, if they breach it, just sack them. Get rid of them. Because look at the position you're in now. The Huw Edwards scandal is being managed. The narrative managed. Just get everybody to sign a morality clause. The Americans do. Everywhere. Every which way. You know what the Americans are like. And like politicians. Look at the political shenanigans of some of them during lockdown. Now, it would have been illegal during the legal lockdowns when we had emergency measures. And there were certain politicians who were having their wicked way with somebody else's wife. That's a morality clause that says, no, you can't make any more money, Bonnie lad. Off you go. Hancock, my hairy backside. So there's the answer for you. There's the answer to this whole story. We need Huw Edwards at some point, and I've said this to you before, that mental health can't be cured. It can only be managed. I do wish him well, genuinely. And I wish his family well, because here's an extraordinary circumstance that the wife's having to deal with. Not Huw. Huw didn't manage it, unless, of course, it's Andy Coulson. But I wish you well. Life's not easy. But at least he's got money to make it easier. My name's Adrian Allen. Thank you for your likes, your subscriptions. Don't forget to ding the bell so you know when a new video is coming. But most of all, thank you for your indulgence. My name's Adrian Allen. I'll see you in the next video.